Hello and welcome to the 27th installment of Aaron Walker Art Talk. I'm Aaron Walker, and today I am joined by Avery Moodie, who is a practice participant. Avery, how are you?
I'm doing great.
That's good to hear. Today you have chosen El Matador. Do you want to go ahead and explain why you chose this piece?
Sure. So I was scrolling through your site, looking at the pieces of art, looking at the little thumbnails and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's cool." And I saw this one, and it needed to be like I had to open up the whole picture because I couldn't tell what it was. And then even once I opened it up all the way, it took me a little bit to figure out exactly what it was. I'm looking at it right now, and it made me look really, really closely at it. And once I figured it out, I was like, oh. Once I figured out the whole scene, I was like, oh. It made me start thinking a lot about. It reminded me of my old thoughts the first time I heard about matadors and these crazy people who go into rings and wave sheets and try to get bulls to run at them. Mm-hmm. But a long time ago, I was just like, oh, that's a dumb thing, and I just kind of like waved it off. Brought those thoughts back up in my mind, and it made me think about kind of inevitability of a career like that, where eventually you're gonna end up on the ground. And I thought that was just like it was like the inevitability of this scene. Plus, I really liked the way you framed it. It's a little too close to the action.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so the framing, typically when I'm thinking of composition, you want to have the whole piece, your whole subject sort of in there, or at least frame it in a way to where it's instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
In this one, it was framed so that the most gory part, the most gory part was kept out. So there's the reference picture for this, and it's actually like a guy, and the horn is going through his mouth, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't really want to have that entire, it's a little too much. So I framed it so that it cut that part out, but you could still hopefully tell that it was a matador and a bull, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's interesting that it brings up like inevitability for you, because in part that's sort of the heroic aspect of the matador, right? That they're facing this thing, this, crazed animal, with the knowledge that like they could very well get maimed or killed, right? Or at least that's hypothetically the case. Yeah. And really, the bulls are, weakened over time, and they're made to be sleep deprived, and all of these sorts of things. Like the matador safety they're more safe than you might expect just by watching these sorts of things. But it's very interesting to me. Did you have any other questions about? Well, let's just say it like that. Did you have any other questions about the piece?
Well, what inspired it? Did you like see the reference picture and think like, oh, I want to make that happen?
Well, so yes, that's generally what happens. Is I'll see a reference picture and be like, I must paint this. In this case, there's like a tendency in my art and in the content that I consume of this theme of man versus nature, or just nature having always being able to come back as being this eternal thing that's unconquerable. So I was going to do a series of pictures of like flowers sticking up through concrete or through fences, like places where man had been and tried to prevent like these natural things from living. And then they like were resilient enough to prosper anyway.
Like Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way.
Right. So, I mean, in terms of sort of the impetus for it, I think that's definitely up there.
Cool. The Matador painting. So I started thinking about like the whole inevitability thing, started thinking of those themes when I sat down to think about it. And it reminded me of my favorite comic book, this Batman comic written by Neil Gaiman. It's called Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader. And it's like Neil Gaiman really likes, like killing people in stories and stuff. But like, you can't kill Batman because it's Batman and he's like an intellectual property that makes a bunch of money. But he figured out a way to like actually kill him. And he found a loophole because Batman's immortal, like canon, he's a human. So he's like, okay, he has to die someday. So he doesn't like show how he dies. He just shows like his near-death experience. And it's a bunch of his villains and stuff telling different stories about how he dies. And none of them are like the same. And it's like the main thesis behind the story is like the inevitability of like, if you pick this life, you're going to die. That's how it works.
Right. Well, that's really interesting that so are you saying, because I haven't read this, right? Mm-hmm. But that they just take for granted that he's going to die. So they start the story at his death and then have his like arch nemesis retelling different stories of his death. So in that way, you can make a comic immediately after that about, Batman's adventures preceding, right, that story.
Yeah, exactly. Because it kind of becomes a meta type thing, because this is a character who has died multiple times in the comics, so like they keep bringing him back. So it's like this character as an entity like can't die, but he's always going to die.
Right.
Which is really interesting for that type of intellectual property.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting because, and I think Jordan Peterson touches on this when he's talking about superheroes, that they have to have some sort of flaw, and that like early in the development of like Superman, they basically made it so to where he was a god. Right. Mm-hmm. So it was like he could turn back time by flying around the earth, and like, you could shoot him a million times and it wouldn't do anything. And people stopped reading because he has to be fallible. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's definitely an aspect of heroes that gets missing. So like when you look at an American writer like Ernest Hemingway, right, he glorified and lionized matadors, and Picasso did as well, I believe, for being this, it's machismo, right? It's the archetypal man, because they are facing death, because they are these limited beings that are basically confronting their limitedness.
It's a good term. It's a good phrase. Yeah, it's like, just like gladiatorial arenas or any other events that the main entertainment value comes from watching a human being get close to a line, like trapeze artists, or to a lesser extent, like American rodeos. It's like we want to see things, get close, and even like you can extrapolate that to like dystopian levels, like Hunger Games or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's inherent entertainment value in seeing people get close to that line to test their limitedness.
I suspect that it's even beyond that like we don't even want to watch them approach the line. We want to like see them go over it. So like people watch NASCAR all the time.
Oh yeah.
Just people going around in a circle. And I forget which comedians are talking about it. It might have been Doug Stanhope. And he's like, you're watching that in the hopes that someone crashes.
Yeah. The most interesting part is when someone turns right.
Yeah. That's funny. And I think it might be the same thing with the Matador, that, which in itself, by the way, we haven't touched on it, is like an incredibly brutal practice, that people don't really understand, that like the point of the bullfighting isn't so that, this bull comes out and he's really angry, and then, this Matador manages to like out sneak him. The point is that the bull dies. And so they will, you stick him, he's bleeding. Eventually the bull dies at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Do you know is that still like a common practice?
In some places it is. It has, I believe in Spain, even like the running of the bulls in Spain has come under fire because of, basically animal rights concerns. But I know that it's still going on. It's not any better. Bulls are still like tortured to death effectively for people's entertainment. But there's competing now, like, the glory of the market is shining through here. There's competing bullfighting competitions that focus on animal welfare and basically not mistreating the bulls, they just fight them or, hold out the flag and they miss. And then they're doing backflips and what have you. These matadors are. And then at the end, the bull just goes back to being, happy and healthy.
Okay. Nice.
So, Avery, do you have any more questions about this piece?
Whew. Not exact. I mean, for you as an artist, I have a few questions of like your technique and stuff. I know like you could go into that because I'm not super familiar with painting in general. So I feel like there's a whole rabbit trail we could go down of you just explaining painting to me.
Sure.
But,
I'm happy to do that real quick. I've covered this in previous episodes, almost with every single guest. Like at some point it comes up. But well, one, this is an older piece. This is from 2014-ish.
Sure.
But the technique is generally the same. I start with a graphite underdrawing. So I have these big old graphite sticks that I use. So I basically do like the outline of the whole thing, come in with black. Wherever the darkest places are, I fill those in. And I'll do like a little outline of all the figures involved. And then from there, I work from dark to light. The darkest places go in first, and then you build to the lightest places. And in this way, you create more of a 3D effect. So there, the last color you do is white, the highlights.
All right. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm kind of seeing the effects. All right, I think that about wraps up for this piece.
Well, all right, Avery. Thank you for coming on, and I'll see you in the next episode, okay?
Okay.